Welcome to the Walrus Talks Reimagining Volunteerism, presented by the Belonging Forum. I'm Jennifer Hollett. I'm the Executive Director of the Walrus, and I'm also your host for this evening. I'm library people, and we are thrilled to be here in person at the Toronto Reference Library. We're belonging, well, that's how I feel when I enter the space. We're also streaming live at thewalrus.ca, and I want to say hello to the over 800 households who registered for our live stream. We have audience members tuning in from across Canada, including Montreal, Salt Spring Island, and Windsor. And also a hello and welcome to folks watching around the world. Hello, Philadelphia, Puerto Vallarta, Johannesburg, Athens, and Vienna. Could we show them some love with a big round of applause and welcome? We also encourage you to share highlights from this conversation tonight on social media. So you can tag us on the platforms at The Walrus and use our hashtag #WalrusTalks. A hashtag is a great way to see what others are saying, but also for us to connect our in-person room with our online audience at home. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we are gathered within the bounds of Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit. This land is also the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. Today, Toronto is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We encourage you to think about the land that you're on, whether you're joining us today in person or online. And at the Walrus, we're honored to carry on a tradition of storytelling. A bit about the Walrus. The Walrus is Canada's conversation. We cover stories across Canada to offer a deeper understanding on who we are for those inside and outside the country. This year, from tariffs to taunts of becoming the 51st state, Canada is the conversation, and the country is standing strong. We are responding to this moment with facts, analysis, and sometimes much-needed humor. You can find us online at thewalrus.ca, in print, on newsstands, or by subscription. And you can also listen to our stories on podcasts, online, and take part in events like this one this evening. This work is independent, and it is powered by our community of donors, supporters, and partners. So thank you all for being here, and to the Belonging Forum, an initiative of the Samuel Center for Social Connectedness, for making this conversation possible. To start tonight's conversation, please welcome to the stage a friend of mine and the Walrus, Kim Samuel, founder of the Belonging Forum.
Hello. It's a joy to be here with you. I'm grateful to the Walrus and to my friend, the kind and wise Jen Hollett, for hosting this evening. And I'm grateful to our esteemed panelists and to all of you for being here. Let me start by posing a seemingly simple question. What does it mean to be a volunteer? Sometimes the word can sound a little bit mundane, like something positive that we do when we have a little extra time on our hands. But look to the etymology of this word, volunteer, and you'll find something deeper. The word comes from the Latin for that which relates to our own free will. To volunteer, in the deeper sense, is the exercise of our free will in the service of something greater than our own self. To volunteer isn't just to perform an act of kindness or to be out gathering service hours when you're in high school. It's about the meaning that goes into that too. It's to embody the ethos that we need in order to transform systems of separateness. I've spent my career focused on questions of how people and communities can overcome social isolation and build belonging. And I feel these questions are at an increasingly important time right now. Oh boy, do I ever. In March, we Canadians slipped in our rankings on the World Happiness Report. Why? largely because of rising levels of loneliness and failing levels of social trust. Just look at the news today. Around the world, people are feeling disconnected from community, from nature, from accountable systems of power and decision-making, along with sources of meaning and purpose. In my years of research and conversations with experts of all stripes, I found one particularly powerful key to building belonging, even in times of isolation: service. When we serve something bigger than ourselves, especially without expecting anything in return, we can step beyond the rigid boundaries of our ego and separateness into humility and community and generosity. Empirical research backs this up. Diverse studies indicate that volunteers experience reduced stress, lower rates of depression, and even decreased rates of hypertension. The act of serving cultivates a sense of purpose and connection, contributing to overall mental and physical well-being. Research demonstrates a positive relationship between volunteering and social cohesion, even in societies facing polarization and division. It fosters trust, solidarity, and ultimately belonging. And so in our time together this evening, we're going to hear from a range of walrus talkers with direct experience about the deeper power and potential of volunteering. And I might also add, the fun of it too. This is a conversation about how to reimagine volunteerism, not just as a one-off charitable act, but as an essential shift in reciprocity that can help heal society in this age of isolation. Thank you very much for joining us.
All right, let's see who's in the room. Raise your hand if you're a volunteer right now. Okay, thank you so much for your service. Raise your hand if you work with volunteers at your job or in one of your roles, can even be your volunteering role. Okay, great. And raise your hand if you want to volunteer or used to before and want to volunteer again. Okay, excellent. So probably covers just about everyone in this room. I'm excited now to introduce you to our talkers. Tonight we'll be hearing from Sara Lyons, Chief Strategy and Advancement Officer with Volunteer Canada. Susan Pinker, Development Psychologist, Columnist, and author of The Village Effect. Darrell Pinto, Director of Employment, Jumpstart, Refugee Talent. Suman Roy, Founder and Executive Director, Feed Scarborough. Kasandra James, Director of Programs at Volunteer Toronto. Vinod Rajasekaran, CEO and Editor-in-Chief, Future of Good. And Cyndi Gilbert, Board Member and Logistics at the Bike Brigade. Thank you all for joining us.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sara Lyons, and I'm with Volunteer Canada. A few weeks ago, at a consultation for the National Volunteer Action Strategy in Brandon, Manitoba, a very well-dressed older woman came in and sat down at the facilitator's table during the lunch portion to kick off the event. After some conversation, she declared herself to be an STP, and asked us, the event staff, to guess what that stood for. My not-so-amazing guess was super terrific person. The answer was same 10 people. And she was talking about how in many communities, whether it's small towns or communities of interest or identity or geography or a school or a sports league, much of the volunteering is done by the same 10 people. And if you're involved at a child's school or a sports team or just about any small community, the notion of STP may feel familiar. The National Volunteer Action Strategy is a year-long process being backboned by the organization I work for, Volunteer Canada, to dig deep into the underlying data, facts, insights into the state of volunteering in this country, and seeks to make it more robust, inclusive, widespread, and resilient. Next winter, through the strategy, we'll be making recommendations to the not-for-profit sector, volunteer leadership organizations, the public, and importantly, governments, on how to modernize and revitalize volunteering across Canada. Volunteering has huge benefits for those that do it, for community, and for the wider social fabric. It's a powerful vehicle to help us address critical social, economic, health, and environmental issues. Recent trends signal a crisis in volunteering and participation marked by declining volunteer rates and increasing demands on organizations that rely on volunteers. Many organizations that count on volunteers are finding it harder to attract and retain them, are seeing increased demand for one-off opportunities, limited availability, folks aging out of volunteering, increased demand for perks and recognition, and the phenomenon of ghosting has come to volunteering. Overlaying this crisis, we're seeing a growing loneliness epidemic and eroding social cohesion. So while the word volunteering can bring to mind the parent at a school bake sale or boxing groceries at a food bank every Wednesday afternoon, it's a much broader opportunity to build engaged citizens and communities able to support community services, democratic and civic structures, and tackle climate crisis. Supported by the federal government and a handful of foundations and corporations, Volunteer Canada has been backboning the development of the strategy to address these crises and create opportunities to address complex challenges and support future generations. Some of the critical questions we're exploring include: what role do material circumstances play in people's ability to volunteer? And how can we address the socioeconomic barriers? What emerging practices did we see during COVID that we should continue? And how might we revitalize the spirit of volunteering while avoiding the exploitation of unpaid labor and upholding decent work in the nonprofit and charitable sector? How can we capture and mobilize and to understand and break down systemic barriers? How is the changing nature of social connection impacting volunteering and participation, and how can it rebuild trust? And how can we find new ways to restore, grow, and celebrate the culture of volunteering, one that is based on reciprocity, generosity, inclusion, and empathy? For many months now, we've been digging deeper into existing research and data. We've launched a new public survey and are conducting consultations like the one I referenced in Brandon. We're speaking to volunteers, volunteer managers, community organization leaders, and sector leaders to really do this modernization and revitalization of a sector that hasn't really had a lot of examination for a long time. One particularly interesting aspect of this work for me is exploring the words, narratives, and frames that we use to talk about volunteering. I started in this role in the fall, so I had a recent chance to introduce this new job that I had taken to a variety of people in my life, in my family, and my friends. And I did notice that not a lot of people's eyes sort of lit up when I told them that I was moving into the volunteering sector. And I especially noticed that the younger the person I was talking to, the less they were initially excited about it. And I really had to kind of tell them more about it to make them go, oh, that sounds so great. Volunteer Canada consultations have shown that volunteering is increasingly seen as an antiquated or narrow term, signaling that we do have work to do in adapting perceptions. As people move away from more traditional institutions towards more informal models, like grassroots movements, mutual aid, neighborhood participation, and community care, those things are becoming more current and more relevant, especially for younger people. Some of the emergent narratives that we're hearing about in our consultation work include shifting away from talking about volunteering as a way to gain work experience, for example, for newcomers or youth, and more as a way to build community and relationships. Better acknowledging that volunteers may have a range of motivations, such as improving language skills, gaining work experience, or building social networks. Promoting a broader definition of volunteering that includes informal and grassroots engagement, mutual aid, and other forms of community participation. And importantly, countering the current trend towards individualization and caring mostly about the self, and centering caring about the collective. And at this particular moment in Canada and in the world, we're also exploring how volunteering can be part of a strong and sovereign Canada, centering themes of coming together to build strong communities, a connected population, and a resilient social safety net and economy. Ultimately, a revitalized volunteer sector is critical infrastructure that can be advancing our social cohesion, combating polarization and division. To return to the same 10 people, these folks are heroes of our communities. But as we look ahead, we need to adjust and grow our investment in volunteering infrastructure, practices, and language to make sure that we're welcoming more than those same 10 people, but instead, everyone. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Susan Pinker. I'm a psychologist and columnist and author of The Village Effect, which is about the impact of face-to-face contact on your happiness and your health and your longevity. And I'm going to start with an old chestnut that I'm sure everybody knows, which tells us that it is better to give than to receive. And what I want to talk about in my few minutes here is that this is not just a cliche. There's evidence behind it, and that's what I'm going to talk about tonight. When you touch somebody, when you reach out to somebody, when you help someone, oxytocin is released into your bloodstream, in the giver as well as the receiver. Now, what is oxytocin? It's a hormone produced deep in your brain, in the limbic system, a part of our brain that originates even in our reptile ancestors, and it deals with our emotions and memory. And it plays a huge part in human bonding, even non-human bonding, and relationships. It regulates our stress levels, our anxiety levels, and sometimes it's referred to as the cuddle chemical or the love hormone. And, you know, it's sort of a cutesy way of referring to it, but what is it really? These microscopic neuropeptides, little tiny particles that you can't see, that are secreted when you're with people whom you enjoy or you're taking care of, who are taking care of you, and they circulate in your bloodstream, especially when you have sex, when you nurse a baby, when you hug someone, when you help someone. It's an evolutionary tweak to our mammalian neurochemistry that makes, to start off, makes sex feel fun. It makes hanging out with friends feel fun. And it also greases the wheels of human interaction. So it's very much behind why people volunteer. What do they get out of it? It's one of the reasons why, as I explain in The Village Effect, why women, on average, live longer than men all over the world and in every culture. About 5 to 7 years longer. And right at the beginning of that book, I discovered that it's their close and their weak bonds formed when they get to know their neighbors, when they participate in their school committees, when they volunteer their time and energy to a cause that they believe in. So let's just segue now to talk about some of our non-human primate relatives, which like us are social animals. Helping others, being with others, giving to others makes a difference, even with, say, Japanese macaques. These are cute, gray, furry animals, red faces, and they have a halo of pale fur all around. However, their cuteness is a little, I would say, eroded by the fact that they're all covered with lice. And this makes them itch and scratch a lot. And it's also a paradox, social scientists have discovered, because the females who they study, because they're looking at the mammalian oxytocin pathways, females who have the most friends or bonds have the fewest lice. You'd think it would be the reverse, right? But the reason is that macaques socialize by grooming each other, picking the eggs of lice or nits out of each other's fur and eating them. I know that's not really appetizing to most of us here, but it means that the more friends you have, the more grooming you get, the fewer lice you have. So in other words, the more social contact you have, really the less infectious disease you have, especially if you're a macaque. Now, it's not just true in non-human primates. Sheldon Cohen, who works at the University of Pittsburgh, has found something similar in humans. People would think, especially after COVID, that if you go out more and socialize more or volunteer more, you catch more colds, but he found the reverse to be true. That the more your social contact with other people face to face, the fewer colds or viruses you catch. And Steve Cole at UCLA has found the same thing with people who have cancer. The more social bonds they have, the better their immunity and the slower their growth of cancer cells. And I just want to mention a caveat about that. It doesn't mean that if people have a cancer that grows or recurs, that it's their fault because they don't have a wide enough social network, not at all. But it's about the fact that social contact up and down regulates our immunity, and our immunity affects the rate of cancer cell growth. And finally, another little scientific anecdote based on evidence. Joan Silk, who's an American anthropologist, has shown something similar but less disgusting, I would say, in the social bonds of female baboons. Those with close friends live longer with less stress and more surviving offspring. I mean, who doesn't want that picture? And by the way, the magic number of close bonds is 3. So all of you think about whether you have 3 people you can depend on. It determines quite a lot. Now let's just move from talking about infection and longevity to talk about happiness. Volunteering sends these feel-good hormones that circulate through our bloodstream. We've talked about oxytocin, but how do we know that volunteering makes us happier, or whether happy people are more likely to volunteer? This is the standard what comes first problem in social science. But there was a recent study in 2020, a UK study in the Journal of Happiness Studies, that showed that the answer is it's both. Happy people are indeed more likely to volunteer, and people who volunteer get happier over time. They found that volunteering is tied to higher well-being right at the outset, too. So it happens fast. Happiness increased after people spent time volunteering. So let's circle back to the beginning. Why would that be? There are neurotransmitters that make us feel great. And something as simple as a high five, a handshake, a pat on the back, like as we do in Quebec, a couple of kisses on the cheek, all of this lowers our stress levels, our cortisol levels, dopamine is generated that gives us a natural little high, and it makes a difference to our health and happiness. So we do know The lowest rates of dementia are found in people who are socially engaged in their communities. We can call that volunteering if we like. We know that men who've had a stroke who meet regularly to volunteer are more protected by volunteering than they are by medication. So how do you infuse every week with a sense of purpose? Reimagine volunteering as something that's good for you, like brushing your teeth. And as a byproduct, it's good for other people too. Thank you.
My name is Darrell Pinto, and I'm with Jumpstart, Refugee Talent. I'm going to take probably less than 7 minutes to share a story with you. And this story has a beginning that lasts 30 years, it has a middle that lasts 10 years, and an end which is really this present moment. I came to Canada as an international student, 2 years of high school and then university. My immigrant parents had a very strong view of what a career should be. And I spent the first 30 years after arriving in Canada focused on exactly that, my career. And sure, I volunteered once in a while, but the volunteer intention was to put something on my resume that furthered my career. I was fairly successful in that corporate career. 30 years, I've lived and worked in Shanghai, in New York, in London, mostly in Toronto. But at the end of that, the start of that second part of my story, or the beginning of the middle of the story, is that I went to Nepal, an adventure trip. I hiked to base camp of Mount Everest, and that 3-week vacation or trip changed my perspective on what I was doing with my life. I ran across many people on that trip who were very poor. I mean, nothing of what you and I own in this audience. Yet they were happy from the inside out, like in a way I could experience and not properly understand, given they hardly had anything that they owned. So when I came back from that trip, I started wondering about, the successful career I had had. I'm nowhere near as happy as these people that I met in Nepal. And I thought about, maybe volunteering some more, giving back to the community. But I did nothing with that. I sat on that idea for a whole year, thinking I should at some point volunteer. A year passed by, and almost a year to the day of my returning back from Nepal, there was a massive earthquake in Nepal that hit Kathmandu. And many of the people that I'd met on that trip, the very happy people, were reaching out to me on Facebook and asking for help. And it was that earthquake that kind of jolted me out of my slumber. And it was that point that I said, I really need to get off my behind and start volunteering. And I started dipping my toe. It literally was 2 hours a month, helping newcomers and refugees arriving in this country. But I was really enjoying it because it connected me with part of my own experience coming here as an international student. And that 2 hours a month gradually grew and grew and grew. And eventually I was volunteering for more hours than I was working in my corporate job. Not getting paid a cent for it, but the amount of joy I was deriving from that volunteering was immense. COVID came along, and like all of you in this room and around the world, it was an immediate pause. All of us were stuck at home. Myself, I had a chance to rethink what I was doing with my life. I was enjoying my corporate career, but it wasn't giving me nearly the sense of joy as my volunteering activities. And I made the decision to leave the corporate world behind and join full-time a charitable organization that is, operates right across Canada, helping refugees find meaningful work. And that switch, many of my corporate peers didn't understand. They immediately thought I was having a COVID breakdown and a crisis of some kind. And I couldn't really translate why I was doing it to them to the extent I understand now. That was 2.5 years ago. And I wish I had made this switch earlier. It really was a mental switch. of seeing volunteering not as an activity to further a career, but a sense of connection with community and giving back. So that leads me to the present moment. So this is 10 years ago that I decided to start dipping my toe into volunteering, and it expanded ever since. So looking back over the last 10 years, here are the benefits I've experienced personally. Health. I am much healthier than when I first, the 30 years at the beginning of the story. My energy levels are pretty amazing. I woke up at 4:45 this morning, and that's 14 hours into the day, and I'm going to keep going. I don't feel tired at all. And I compare that. My benchmark is my brothers and sister, who have the same lived experience, the same family as I did, but they get drained after a day at work. And for me, it's really finding my passion in doing what I do and volunteering, making it a full-time job, that I find energy giving. I met my partner over the last 10 years while volunteering. So that's another benefit. I wouldn't chalk that up to everybody, but it worked for me. And I said this is the end of the story, but really, for me, it's a continuing part of my life journey. I would encourage everyone here, if my excuse earlier on was I don't have the time, I'm focused on career, I have family. Everybody can make time. And I will guarantee you this, in the time that you do find, whether it's an hour or whether it's days, it will give you energy and a sense of connection with community, which is just so very important in this day and age. Thank you.
Hello, good evening, everybody. My name is Suman Roy, and I'm the CEO and founder of an organization called Feed Scarborough. I'm also an author and podcaster with the Zero Hunger Project. So I'm going to tell you a story like everybody else, but a story on the beginning of pandemic in March of 2020. Try to remember that day when the government of Canada announced we are going to close down, everything is closing, there's a global pandemic. I had a great job, and suddenly the same day I saw on Facebook that our only food bank in the community was shutting down as well for the pandemic. Now keep in mind, immigrating from India, in India we don't really see volunteerism as we see here in Canada. There is not a special thing that we really want to go out and do, we're going to volunteer today. I wasn't brought up in that culture. That wasn't what it was. When things happened, we needed to jump and help. That's what we knew, not about volunteerism to be something very specific. So when I saw that, immediately I thought about we need to do something in this community to help the most vulnerable. So I literally went knocking on doors of my neighbors and said, we need to help. We need you to come out and help. Probably people thought I'm crazy knocking on doors in the beginning of pandemic. Really, we don't know what's going on. But the community responded. They came out, and we were trying to put money on the table, go to No Frills, do some shopping, come back, and give it to people. That's how we started Feed Scarborough. It wasn't planned that we will volunteer. And we have a few here in the audience in the very initial days who had come out and jumped and helped. I don't know how many of you who are here at least or are original volunteers who said, okay, I'm going to go and volunteer. I think the mentality was, there is a need. Let's go and find a solution. So now, looking at the ground level, as an organization, we entertain little less than 500 volunteers every week. We see that a lot of our community members are coming and helping because they see the need and they need to be there for their community, which is a fantastic feeling. So we started off, we grew like wildfire, unfortunately. We don't want to grow. I'm in one of those businesses where I want to shut my business down the first opportunity I get. But unfortunately, we are growing like wildfire. We are serving around 8,500 people every week. It's a massive organization right now. But one thing that I see is who is actually coming and volunteering and why? And we do surveys within our volunteers, and the last survey I literally did this past weekend to get the most up-to-date information before I came here to talk today. And one thing that we saw, that just less than 30% of our volunteers, now keep in mind, we are in Scarborough. I want to mention that for the context. Little less than 30% are actually people who are born in Canada. We have around 48% of our volunteers are less than 1 year in this country. So that will give you a little bit of perspective into who is coming and volunteering. Now let's get into why, because that is something that we also ask, is why are they volunteering? It's only around 36% of our volunteers said, oh, we just want to come and give to the community. A majority of it is we want to network. We are new to this country. We want to get to know people. While we are doing that, we are doing something good. So the first instinct in their mind, and this is data, this is not me saying that's a good thing or a bad thing. The first thing is, we are new to this country. We need to establish ourselves. We need to get to know our neighbors. What is the best way to do? Let's find a local organization, go and spend time, get to know our neighbors. While doing that, we are doing something good for the community. So there is a lot that actually we need to unpack here. It is, what are they getting? If we are, gone are the days when, and especially when I'm talking of Toronto and Scarborough, gone are the days where majority of the volunteers were retirees who used to come, volunteer because they have all the time in their world and they want to give back to the community. That's a very small population now. The majority that we see on the ground is they are expecting something in return. It's not financial. And in anybody who works nonprofit or charity know that we have no money to give ever. We are always broke. But the reality is they are coming for that experience. And what they do with that experience is a whole different ballgame. Are they going to take that experience and put it on their resume to have their Canadian experience? Are they going to take that networking experience to actually figure out how to grow their network? Everybody has their own different reasons. But there is something they get out of it. And as an organization who literally survives because of volunteers, if we don't understand and respect that, we are missing out. So we certainly respect that. We have networking events within the volunteers and try to get to know each other. We have a system where people can claim their shifts so they can go to different locations and volunteer, try to get to know more of like-minded people. We heard stories, but we have all sort of different benefits that we can provide. And one of the benefits, and I'm not advertising this, but in last 5 years, 6 of our couples came out of our volunteering. So we are a matchmaker too. So if you're single and looking to find people, feel free, look us up, Feed Scarborough. We are more than happy to provide that service for free. I'm just saying. And it's not an online service, so there's no blind dating going on. But that is, the reality is everybody is coming for a reason, and we need to provide that reason as a volunteer organization. We cannot survive without them, but also they are our biggest asset, and we need to rely on them. And just with that, I'm going to wrap up. I'm Suman Roy, those who didn't catch it in the first round, and follow us on our podcast at the Zero Hunger Project. Thank you.
My name is Kasandra James. I am the Director of Programs at Volunteer Toronto. This evening, I'm going to tell you some stories, like my ancestors told stories, as a form of knowledge sharing and connection and community building. Centuries after being trafficked to the shores of the Caribbean, stories are how we come to know who we are and how we learn to care for each other. My favorite story of community making is one my mother loves to tell. My entire life, she has told stories of leading her church's senior choir when she was just a teenager. It is a foundational story of her community life. And she continues to play and compose music, teach others, and lead choirs until this day. I learned how to make community, but unfortunately not how to play any instruments, by my mother's stories and her example. When I moved to Canada, I learned a new story of community making. The story of volunteerism was complicated. Volunteer to learn the Canadian way. Join cultural groups for belonging and safety. Volunteer to get work experience. Like many newcomers, I found the story of volunteering to be daunting. Still, volunteering has been a winding path to social and economic integration for me and for many others. I can trace my presence on this stage back through that story of volunteering. However, I want to be clear that heartwarming, successful stories of volunteerism cannot overshadow the convoluted, often broken, and sometimes harmful experiences of volunteering in the lives of young people and newcomers, Black and Indigenous communities, seniors, persons with disabilities. At Volunteer Toronto, we most often engage people who are facing barriers to their desire to volunteer. Last year, 50% of those people had been in Canada less than 12 months. Even before newcomers arrive, the federal government tells them to volunteer explicitly, and I quote, to show potential employers that you're willing to work hard. This story that volunteerism is intricately tied to newcomers' ability to work in Canada is retold in our settlement agencies and our job programs, and in the volunteer roles of nonprofits. We tell similar stories to young people. Here in Ontario, we require all our high school students to do 40 hours of community service in order to graduate. And I'm well aware that some of you may be thinking, these are excellent initiatives that foster civic engagement through volunteerism. And how could that be a bad thing? Well, have you asked the refugee expectant mother who is looking for a home and a doctor and a job what being told to volunteer means for her? What about the Indigenous student that just learned that he cannot use his time in ceremony towards his service hours because no nonprofit was involved in that process? Too often, the feel-good stories of volunteerism can mask real, persistent othering of communities that do not look like or show up as the narrowly defined, colonially constructed story of volunteerism that we tell here in this country. And the harm that that causes is not just to these communities, it's to Canada itself. We'll take Ontario as an example. When the government created the 40-hour mandate, the goal was to foster youth civic engagement by forcing young people to volunteer. What do we have more than 25 years later? Formal volunteerism is down, donations are down, and as evidenced by our last 2 provincial elections, voting is also down. The first cohorts of that mandate are 40-year-olds. Are they more civically engaged? Has anyone asked a teenager what they experience with this mandate? For many, it's a necessary nuisance, but for others, it is an obstacle to their graduation. We hear similar sentiments from newcomers. The story of volunteerism that we tell them is one of transaction. Do this unpaid labor, and maybe we'll give you access to a job. Maybe we will consider your experience from other places as valid. Maybe we'll consider you Canadian enough to work here. And the result is that newcomers and young people get what they need from this system that we've forced them into, and then they get out. And I want to be clear here, that I'm not saying that young people and newcomers are civically disengaged. Many people are making community in ways that look unfamiliar and do not fit into our charitable model. They are practicing community in ways that don't require formal institutions or taxable donations or volunteer managers. They don't rely on the transfer of time and resources from those who have more to those who have less, but are instead built on deep reciprocity and philosophies like Ubuntu and all my relations and collective liberation. At Volunteer Toronto, we have been privileged to see some of those stories up close. In 2023, we partnered with the Toronto Foundation to support 35 initiatives across the city of Toronto with $1,000 microgrants. Our goal, to reduce social isolation and build connection in Canada's loneliest city. None of our applicants had to provide a charitable number or give us their SIN number or even actually be a real organization. Many of the groups created their name during the application process. And do you know what we saw? Indigenous land stewards leading a gardening project with Toronto Community Housing residents, planting and harvesting and learning together about native plants and traditional medicine. We saw neighbors in Kensington Market coming together in a healing circle to recognize community members that they had lost during the pandemic and to overdoses. We saw a group of Afro-Caribbean teens leading arts workshops to help their new Afghan neighbors navigate culture shock. Story after story of people coming together for their neighbors, their communities, the stranger next door, helping the unseen to feel seen, the disconnected to feel a sense of belonging, and creating opportunities for people to give back in meaningful ways. And the lesson we learned was that people are ready to rebuild in their communities. We just have to open the door to opportunity. Volunteerism and philanthropy can provide necessary infrastructure to resource and enable neighborhood-level leadership if we're dedicated to championing volunteerism at this time. We have to do the work of co-dreaming new systems of civic engagement that sometimes will require us to get out of the way of community action. National Volunteer Week and a federal election are in a couple weeks. I invite us all to consider how we tell new, more diverse stories of volunteerism in Canada at this time. Stories where food security happens at community garden parties and not just at food banks, where pride parades are planned by kids in their neighborhoods and not just by larger institutions, and where teens lead arts programs and choirs and learn that they too have the power to shape their world. Thank you so much for listening to my stories.
About a year and a half ago, a close friend of mine who volunteered and worked in the nonprofit sector disappeared. Him and I, we used to speak often, we used to connect often, and I tried every channel to get in touch with him, to see if everything was okay. About 3 months into my search, I went from, he must be really busy, to there must be something really wrong. He wasn't kidnapped or anything. He didn't run away from home. He ran away from his passion. And that passion was the nonprofit and charitable sector. His passion was working with people in need, supporting folks on the front lines, and deeply caring for people. He ran away from his passion. He burnt out. For more than 2 decades, he helped people on the front lines. He supported people in need in all kinds of neighborhoods. He committed himself to many causes. He was one of the most energetic and bubbly people I knew, and his presence went from bubbly to burnt out. I really missed him, and so did thousands of other people. And like many, he announced his burnout on LinkedIn. The sector that is meant to be caring for people and families has a massive care problem. I feel it. A lot of folks in the room might also feel that there's a problem. But how big of a problem is it? Who's most affected? Who's least affected? What are some of the biggest factors affecting well-being? And what needs to change? No one really knows, because there's no high-quality pan-Canadian data on this. So, at Future of Good, we decided to do something no one has ever done before in Canada at this scale. About a year ago, the Future of Good team came together with Environics Research and, supported by a number of audacious funders, embarked on the most comprehensive and representative research survey on the health and well-being of nonprofit workers ever conducted in Canada. It's called the Changemaker Wellbeing Index, and it will be released in late May, and you'll be able to download the initial findings report for free. Now we have the data and evidence to know how well we actually are. The nonprofit world is at the precipice. Well, it's the best time in the history of humanity to be alive and volunteer and share and support. The systems humans designed decades ago continue to constantly sideline, ignore, simplify, and silence the well-being of people actually doing the work. The majority of the nonprofit and charitable sector in this country is run by volunteers, and yet care and well-being have become uncomfortable internal topics. They become taboo topics. But well-being can no longer be an add-on. It should have never been an add-on. People are burnt out from formal volunteering roles. They can't take care of their own families at home. We're all imaginative people here in this room. Where is our imaginations when it comes to well-being in the sector? When it comes to prioritizing well-being, we all need to go from what is to what if. And here I'm going to offer you 3 of my what if questions to you. My first what if question: what if your volunteers become the biggest champions of your organization? According to the Changemaker Wellbeing Index, only 25% of workers say they would promote their organization to a friend. 25%. And here's the thing. More than 70% of people who work at money marts say they would promote their workplace to a friend. 70%. Money marts beat us. How can you even advance your cause with a number like 25%, especially if your nonprofit relies on word of mouth or reputation to attract and retain volunteers? Volunteers can become your biggest supporters and champions, but they need their managers and supervisors and teams to prioritize well-being. It's the biggest factor for retaining volunteers. My second what-if question: what if your volunteers always felt well-rested? According to our research, more than 2/3 of workers sometimes feel exhausted, and more than 1/3 often feel exhausted and fatigued. This is absurd. How can you fundraise well, or support a family, or mentor someone, or deliver services well, when the majority of your team often feel exhausted and fatigued. And just look around you in this room. That's a majority of you in every row. My third what-if question. What if your volunteers live nourished lives? According to the Changemaker Wellbeing Index, a bit over 50% of workers, especially those in frontline and client services roles, say they are food insecure. 50%. How can you expect them to show up energized if they're not nourished? This reduces their physical capacities, their cognitive capacities, to work, to volunteer. Your star volunteer likely doesn't know where the next meal is coming from. The folks running your food banks in your neighborhoods might not be able to afford groceries this week. That's the reality. Folks, these are not new issues. These are deep systemic issues that have made the paid and volunteer workforce more fragile than ever. According to our index, about 33% of nonprofit workers are considering leaving their jobs. Many are considering leaving the sector at a time when demand is skyrocketing. That's the level of systemic fragility in communities across the country. As an organization, Future of Good's focus is illuminating important transformations shaping the social purpose world. And well-being is one of those transformations. We have not centered the well-being of our volunteers or workers. I've offered you 3 what-if questions. So now it's your responsibility to ask at least one what-if question with the team you volunteer with. We now have the research, we have the evidence, we have the data to change things. The nonprofit sector runs on purpose, but it cannot run on empty. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Cyndi Gilbert, and I'm here today because of my involvement with the Bike Brigade. I first heard about the Bike Brigade when I was at a friend's event for healthcare workers, which was my day job, for some of our neighbors living in encampments at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic in early 2021. And at the time, I was clinic faculty at one of the community health centers in downtown Toronto called Parkdale Community Health Center. And I noticed that many of our patients and clients and neighbors were really struggling to access not only food, but healthcare services, social services, and community programs. As a lifelong cyclist and community activist, I was first drawn to Bike Brigade's goals of connecting people with people, people with food, and doing it all by bike. I also really resonated with the Bike Brigade's community values of solidarity, not charity, reciprocity, and community care. For those of you unfamiliar, the Bike Brigade were a group of volunteers, and we don't really call ourselves volunteers, even though that's the name of today's talk. We talk about riders, we talk about funders, we talk about recipients of our deliveries, and we talk about members of our team as a whole. But we are a group of people, both on wheels and off, who mobilize to deliver food and other essential supplies in solidarity for more equitable and resilient neighborhoods in Toronto. And early on in this COVID-19 pandemic, about a year before I first heard about the Bike Brigade, Dave Shellnut, also known as the biking lawyer, who is here with us today too, realized that a lot of people were going to have a really tough time getting what they needed. And he put a call out to people that he knew who were maybe willing to help, and put a call out to social service agencies and food banks and mutual aid initiatives that had popped up, asking if they needed help. And the immediate and resounding swell of responses from everybody was yes, and yes, and yes, and more, please. Since those early days, there have been countless people who played an instrumental role and continue to play instrumental roles in the founding and the growing of the Bike Brigade. And collectively, I kind of alluded to this earlier, we really actively, though never perfectly, tried to move away from sort of historical imaginings of volunteerism, as it were, away from transactional one-way service provision and ideas of charity and saviorism. Rather, we're really committed to fostering a culture of care and actioning for climate and social justice at the same time. We try to move more towards reciprocity, that two-way value exchange between people engaged with the work. Solidarity, where we each leverage whatever skills or abilities we have and use them to redistribute resources in our own communities. We think about mutual aid, working together for the goals that meet the needs of everybody involved. And to that end, we have riders who are also board members. We've had board members who are also recipients. We really think about community building, forming those long-lasting relationships with our neighbors. In other words, we care for us. We're a strength-based organization. We support, trust, and empower our members and communities, encouraging integrity, mentorship, shared learning, workshops, community funding for our riders who themselves face food insecurity and can't always meet the needs that they may have, whether that's outfitting their bike for all seasons or even just getting repairs. And we work through what we call communities of practice. So leveraging, again, those skills, thinking about collectively, how do we form teams that work together for common goals, respecting everybody's input. Through that collective leadership and action, community partners that we work with get reliable volunteers to include free last mile deliveries for their clients, which otherwise might be done by car or not at all. Recipients get helpful service from a friendly face, and Bike Brigade members get to build strong and supportive community and contribute directly to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. In 2024 alone, the Bike Brigade partnered with 35 agencies in Toronto, food banks, and mutual aid initiatives. We had about 250 active riders, made over 8,000 deliveries to 225 individual recipients, and traveled almost 14,500 kilometers by bicycle. Since 2020 alone, we've made 48,000 deliveries to over 3,200 recipients, traveled 110 kilometers plus by bicycle, and had about 1,000 active riders. For me personally, another thing that drew me to volunteer with the Bike Brigade and continues to keep me engaged is how easy and accessible it is to get involved. I could sign up for as many or as few rides as I wanted to every week when I first started out as a rider, and there were opportunities to volunteer every day of the week, committing to only just one ride at a time. Every week, I'd scan a delivery calendar, sign up for one or more rides, get a friendly dispatch text the night before with all the details of the delivery I was gonna make, do the delivery, and then text somebody at dispatch when I was finished, usually with a selfie, often masked, at those early days, and get a heartfelt thank you message back. In those early days too, I often signed up myself for group rides because, like many of us during the COVID-19 pandemic, I felt just as isolated as some of the people I was delivering food to. I could connect with people at either the pickup or drop-off. And it was really easy to just incorporate into my day, and that's something we hear from a lot of our riders. It only took 1 or 2 hours at a time. I could do it on my lunch break or on my way home from work. For many of our riders, I got to show up for my community in a fun and active way, get some exercise in, and visit different parts of the city than I normally would on my regular routine. I created positive, friendly interactions with people I wouldn't otherwise get to meet. And those interactions were sometimes among the few that either of us had. And there was really a win-win-win for me, for the delivery recipient, and for the campaign partner. The first few years, those signups were just done on shared Google spreadsheets and on social media. But just as how community members were initially drawn to get involved with the Bike Brigade and really encouraged to apply their unique skill sets and make magic happen, we were very fortunate to have an amazing software team led by Max Batesman, who problem solved and developed a custom purpose-built open source app that we now use. It makes signups and coordinating deliveries a breeze. On a more personal side, in terms of my relationship, in December of 2023, I was the pedestrian victim of a hit and run, and that resulted in some pretty major life-altering injuries as well as just life-altering as a whole, including a spinal cord injury. Like many people who experience serious injuries and chronic health conditions, I felt like I had really lost a sense of myself, a sense of my own identity, and a sense of purpose. I lost my job and wasn't able to go to work or go for hikes or bike rides or rock climb or ski or do almost all of the activities that I found joy in because they were mostly physical outdoor activities that really rely on your use of your legs. And just like many of the recipients that I had made those relationships with, I couldn't grocery shop on my own, and I began to feel more socially isolated. I started to get used to a new version of myself, and I thought about getting involved in community again as a way of reintegrating into the world to counter the social isolation and loneliness that I was feeling, to reconnect with community and that sense of myself again. So I reached back out to Bike Brigade to see what other kinds of potential off wheels, or at least off bike wheels, opportunities, and was thrilled to reconnect and be welcomed in and find new ways to be involved. So nowadays, I am a board member and part of the logistics team that coordinates deliveries. I lead the campaign for the People's Pantry, which is a fully mutual aid initiative that provides chef-cooked meals and desserts, partnering also with Friends of Ruby, which is a local organization that offers mental health services, social services, and housing to 2S LGBTQIA+ youth in Toronto. And they, Friends of Ruby, recently experienced a pretty severe flood, so they need all of the love, extra love these days. And I am forever grateful to this community I have found through being part of Bike Brigade. I am so proud of the small but impactful ways that our riders, our logistics team, our software team, our anti-oppression team help make our city more connected, more climate friendly, and more accessible, one delivery at a time. Thank you.
Cyndi, I have to add, my Bike Brigade sweatshirt always gets a lot of compliments, so on top of all that great work, excellent swag. Thank you to our talkers, Sara Lyons, Susan Pinker, Darrell Pinto, Suman Roy, Kasandra James, Vinod, Rajasekaran, and Cyndi Gilbert. Please, a round of applause for their talks this evening. Now, I'm going to invite our talkers to head to the reception, and while they do, want to give them a head start so they can grab a drink before everyone joins them. I'm going to tell the rest of you here in person at home a bit more about some things we have coming up with the Walrus. If you enjoyed tonight's event, wait, there's more. We have talks coming up. Join us online on Friday, April 25th for the Walrus Talks at Home Tariffs. We're all talking tariffs. I'd like a little bit more details so I know what I'm talking about. This is a daytime event. We'll have 4 expert speakers. They will unravel the impacts of the U.S. trade war on Canada, and we'll discuss what elbows up means for Canadian consumers and businesses. And then on Thursday, May 29th, we'll be back in person at the Isabel Bader Theatre here in Toronto for Concordia University presents the Walrus Talks Power Economy. This event explores how Canada can lead the global transition to a low-carbon future. We encourage you to stay in touch with the Walrus. The best way to do that is to sign up for our free weekly newsletter. You can do that if you're in the room at our table in the back. We'll also follow up with everyone tomorrow by email, and you can opt into the newsletter that way as well. We encourage you to subscribe to the Walrus. We have a special offer for those of you with us at the library this evening. A full-year subscription to the Walrus, that's 8 print issues delivered right to your door for just $25. It's a deal if you've ever picked up an individual issue of a magazine on newsstand. Just stop by that Walrus table and we'll set you up. The Walrus is a registered charity powered by people like you. With your support, we can ensure that everyone has access to responsible, fact-based coverage on the very issues that will shape Canada's future. You can donate to the Walrus at thewalrus.ca/support or come by our table. All gifts of $20 or more will receive a charitable tax receipt. A thank you to everyone at the Belonging Forum for making these talks possible. Thank you as well to our annual sponsors, Air Canada, Bullfrog Power, Inspire, RBC Emerging Artists, and Rogers. And a round of applause for all of you volunteering. I think we're all here because we believe in the power of volunteering, the opportunity to make it better, and to all connect in community. Thank you for attending in person and online and being part of the Walrus community. Have a great evening. We'll see you in the reception.